The icy wind cut through the quiet streets of Brooklyn, where Buddy, a German shepherd with a once proud history, stood chained in a barren backyard. His thick coat, now dull and matted, offered little protection against the biting cold. He shivered uncontrollably, his breath visible in the frosty air. Once a celebrated military dog, Buddy had spent a decade serving alongside soldiers, saving lives with his sharp instincts and unyielding courage. Now, he was nothing more than a shadow of his former self, left to fend off loneliness and the brutal elements. Buddy's life hadn't always been like this. For 10 years he had been a hero, a lifeline in dangerous territories, trusted by his handler, Sergeant Jake Carter. Together, they had faced countless challenges, building an unbreakable bond. But time had caught up with Buddy. As his muzzle began to gray and his movement slowed, the decision was made to retire him. Jake, facing his own struggles after leaving the military, had reluctantly placed Buddy in a rehoming program, trusting it would give his loyal companion the peaceful retirement he deserved. But the promise of a better life had been broken. Instead of finding a loving home, Buddy had been handed off to people who saw him as little more than a tool. Chained in a cold backyard, his only purpose was to bark at intruders. Days turned to weeks, and weeks to months, as Buddy's world shrank to the length of his chain. The vibrant, courageous dog, who once stood tall in the face of danger, now lay curled in the dirt, his spirit dimmed but not extinguished. Buddy's isolation was profound. He had been surrounded by people his entire life, working closely with soldiers who had relied on him in life-or-death situations. Now, he barked at the occasional passerby, hoping, praying, that someone would notice him, that someone would care. Yet, despite the neglect, the hunger, and the cold, Buddy's spirit held on. Deep within, he clung to the memories of better days, of a time when he was valued, loved, and respected. One bitter morning, as snow fell softly over Brooklyn, Buddy lay curled near the fence, his body trembling with the effort of staying warm. He barely noticed the sound of footsteps approaching until a shadow fell over him. Weakly lifting his head, Buddy saw a woman standing at the gate, her expression a mix of shock and sadness. She knelt, her breath visible in the icy air. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What have they done to you?" Buddy stared at her, too exhausted to bark, but something in her tone, a warmth he hadn't felt in months, stirred a faint wag of his tail. It was a small movement, but it spoke volumes. The woman's eyes softened, and she reached into her pocket, pulling out a treat. "It's okay, boy," she said gently. "I'm here to help." The woman's name was Emily, a volunteer with a local rescue organization. She had been alerted to Buddy's condition by a concerned neighbor, unable to bear seeing the once proud dog deteriorating further. As she crouched by the gate, Emily's heart ached. The raw patches on Buddy's neck from the chain, his ribs visible beneath his dirty fur, and the haunting look in his amber eyes told a story of neglect and survival. Emily's hands trembled as she dialed the number for animal control, her breath visible in the frigid air. She couldn't bear to leave Buddy in this state a moment longer, but she knew the situation needed to be handled carefully. "There's a neglected German shepherd," she explained, her voice firm but tinged with urgency. "He's chained outside in freezing conditions and he's clearly in distress. Please, send someone quickly." As she ended the call, Buddy's weary eyes met hers. He didn't growl or bark, but the faint wag of his tail persisted, as if he sensed that help had finally arrived. "Hang in there, boy," Emily murmured, slipping another treat through the fence. "You don't deserve this." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before a van from animal control pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, their faces set with determination. Emily explained the situation, and together they approached the gate. Buddy watched them cautiously, his ears twitching at the sound of their voices. "It's okay, Buddy," one of the officers said softly, as he knelt to unhook the rusty chain that had bound Buddy for so long. The moment the weight was lifted from his neck, Buddy let out a low, almost relieved sigh. Emily's heart ached as she saw the raw, reddened patches on his skin where the chain had rubbed. Buddy hesitated as they coaxed him out of the yard. His legs wobbled from weeks, perhaps months, of malnutrition and confinement. But when Emily crouched and held out her hand, her voice soft and encouraging, he took a tentative step forward. Then another, and another. Soon he was at her side, leaning into her touch as though finding comfort for the first time in ages. The officers loaded Buddy into the van with care, ensuring he was wrapped in a thick blanket to ward off the biting cold. Emily climbed in beside him, her presence steadying him as the vehicle rumbled to life. "You're safe now," she whispered, stroking his matted fur. "No more chains, no more cold." The shelter was warm and bustling when they arrived, a stark contrast to the freezing backyard where Buddy had been trapped. The staff moved efficiently, examining him with gentle hands. Buddy endured it all silently, his trust in people slowly rekindling under Emily's watchful gaze. "He's severely underweight," one of the vets said, her brow furrowed, "and those sores on his neck will need treatment. But the good news is, his heart is strong, and his spirit, well, that's still there." Emily smiled through her tears as she knelt beside Buddy. "He's a fighter," she said, scratching behind his ears. Buddy leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly as if savoring the moment. Over the next few days, Buddy began to heal. The staff cleaned his wounds, fed him nutritious meals, and provided the warmth and care he had been denied for so long. But it was Emily who spent the most time by his side, talking to him softly, walking him around the shelter's grounds, and reminding him of what it felt like to be loved. As Buddy's strength returned, so did glimpses of the proud, courageous dog he had once been. He started wagging his tail more often, his ears perked up at the sound of familiar voices, and his steps grew steadier. The staff marveled at his resilience, but Emily wasn't surprised. "He's a hero," she told them one afternoon, "and heroes don't give up." By the end of the week, Buddy had made remarkable progress. His coat, while still rough, had regained some of its sheen. His amber eyes, once dull, now shone with a glimmer of hope. But one question lingered in Emily's mind. What had happened to this incredible dog to leave him in such a state? And more importantly, could she ensure that his future would be as bright as his past had once been? Buddy's transformation at the shelter was nothing short of miraculous. Each day he grew stronger, his gait steadier, and his demeanor more confident. But Emily couldn't shake the nagging question: who had allowed such a noble dog to fall into neglect? She was determined to uncover Buddy's past and ensure his story was known. One afternoon, as Emily walked Buddy through the shelter's courtyard, she noticed the faint gleam of an old tag hanging from his collar. It had been overlooked amidst his initial care and cleaning. Kneeling down, she gently turned the tag over in her hand. The engraving was weathered, but still legible. "Buddy, service number 84592, property of Sergeant Jake Carter." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "You were a service dog," she whispered, her voice laced with both awe and sadness. Buddy wagged his tail slightly, sensing her attention. "And Jake Carter, who is he? What happened to you?" Taking a photo of the tag, Emily returned to the shelter's office and began her search. A quick internet query revealed a trove of information about Sergeant Jake Carter, a decorated veteran of the U.S. Army K-9 unit. Articles highlighted his heroic missions overseas, always accompanied by his loyal partner, Buddy. Together, they had saved countless lives, earning accolades and the admiration of their peers. But one detail stood out. Carter had retired 2 years ago after sustaining injuries in the line of duty. A deeper dive into public records showed that he had returned to civilian life in Brooklyn, the same borough where Buddy had been found. Emily's stomach turned. How had a hero like Buddy ended up chained and forgotten in such conditions? Was it a tragic oversight, or was something more sinister at play? Later that evening, Emily made a phone call to the number listed for Jake Carter. The line rang several times before a gruff voice answered. "Carter speaking." "Sergeant Carter?" Emily began hesitantly. "My name is Emily Hayes. I'm a volunteer at a local animal shelter, and I believe we've found your dog, Buddy." There was a long pause on the other end. When Jake finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. "Buddy? You have him?" "Yes," Emily said, her heart clenching at the pain in his voice. "But I need to understand how he ended up in such terrible conditions. He's safe now, but he was chained outside in the cold for who knows how long." Jake let out a shaky breath. "I didn't know," he said softly. "After I retired, I couldn't take care of him the way he deserved. I thought I was doing the right thing by placing him in a rehoming program for retired service dogs. I was told he'd be placed with a good family." Emily's throat tightened. "Well, that didn't happen. Whoever took him in neglected him horribly. But he's strong, Sergeant. He's recovering." Jake's voice broke. "I failed him," he said, his regret palpable. "I need to make this right. Can I see him?" Emily hesitated, unsure of the full story, but feeling Jake's sincerity. "You should," she said finally. "But let's take things slow. Buddy's been through a lot, and I want to make sure this is the right step for him." The next day, Jake arrived at the shelter. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with the weight of years of service etched into his face. As he entered the courtyard, Buddy stood at Emily's side, his tail wagging cautiously. The moment Jake stepped closer, something remarkable happened. Buddy froze, his amber eyes locked on Jake, and for a moment there was silence. "Buddy," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. He knelt, extending a hand. Buddy hesitated, then took a tentative step forward. And another. Recognition lit his eyes as he let out a low, excited bark, rushing into Jake's arms. The man wrapped his arms around the dog, his tears falling freely. "I'm so sorry, boy," Jake murmured. "I never meant for this to happen." Emily watched the reunion, her heart swelling with emotion. It was clear that the bond between them had never faded. Despite the time and the hardship that had separated them, the emotional reunion between Jake and Buddy had left Emily speechless. The loyalty and love that radiated from Buddy as he leaned into Jake's arms were undeniable. But even with this heartfelt moment, questions lingered. Could Jake truly provide the stability Buddy needed now? And could Buddy rebuild his trust after everything he had endured? As the initial wave of emotion subsided, Jake turned to Emily, his voice filled with resolve. "I want to take him home," he said. "I owe him that much. He's my partner, my family." Emily hesitated. Her heart tugged in different directions. "Jake, Buddy's been through so much. Physically, he's on the mend, but emotionally, he's still fragile. Are you ready to give him the care and attention he needs? This can't just be about making things right for you. It has to be about what's best for him." Jake nodded solemnly. "I understand." and I won't make the same mistake twice. If it takes time to earn his trust again, I'm willing to put in the work." Emily studied his face, searching for any sign of doubt, but all she saw was sincerity. "All right," she said finally. "We'll start slow. Buddy stays with the shelter for now, but you can visit him daily. Let's see how he adjusts." The next few weeks were a testament to Jake's commitment. Each morning he arrived at the shelter, greeting Buddy with a gentle voice and a handful of his favorite treats. At first, Buddy approached cautiously, his tail wagging only slightly, but day by day the old bond between them began to reemerge. Jake spent hours walking Buddy around the shelter grounds, brushing his coat, and simply sitting beside him, speaking softly about their days in the service. Luke, Emily's own German shepherd, and a frequent presence at the shelter, often joined them. The two dogs formed a quiet camaraderie, with Luke acting as a steadying influence whenever Buddy seemed unsure. "He's learning to trust again," Emily observed one afternoon, watching as Buddy playfully nudged Jake's hand for more attention. "And so are you." Jake smiled, his eyes softening. "He never stopped being my partner. I just forgot how much I needed him too." One afternoon, Jake brought something that changed everything, a small, tattered vest with the words K9 Unit emblazoned across the back. It was Buddy's old service vest, worn during their years together in the military. Jake knelt and held it out, letting Buddy sniff it. The reaction was immediate. Buddy's ears perked, his tail wagging furiously as he barked in recognition. "You remember this, don't you, boy?" Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've been through so much together." Emily watched, her heart swelling as Buddy nuzzled the vest, a spark of his old confidence returning. It was as though the vest reminded him of who he had been, not just a dog, but a hero. "That's the Buddy I knew," Jake murmured, tears glistening in his eyes. "He's still in there." The turning point came during a routine trip to the park near the shelter. Jake and Buddy were walking side by side when a sudden commotion erupted nearby. A loud crash as a cyclist collided with a bench. The noise startled several dogs in the park, sending them barking and pulling at their leashes. Buddy froze for a moment, his body tense, before stepping in front of Jake protectively. His instincts, honed through years of training, kicked in, and he watched the scene intently until it was clear there was no threat. Jake knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've still got it, don't you?" he said softly. Buddy let out a low bark, his tail wagging. The moment was small but significant, a sign that Buddy was regaining not just his physical strength, but his sense of purpose. Back at the shelter, Emily listened as Jake recounted the moment, her smile warm. "He's ready," she said simply. "And so are you." Jake looked at Buddy, who sat at his feet, his eyes bright and alert. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady. "We're ready." The day Buddy left the shelter was one of quiet triumph. The sun shone brightly over Brooklyn as Jake arrived, his truck parked just outside. He walked in with a spring in his step, carrying a brand-new leash and collar he had picked out for Buddy, a deep navy blue, matching the vest Buddy had once worn with pride. Buddy greeted Jake with an eager bark, his tail wagging furiously. His coat had regained its glossy sheen, his amber eyes were bright, and his once wary demeanor had transformed into a confidence that radiated from him. Emily stood nearby, her heart swelling as she watched the reunion. "He's come a long way," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You both have." Jake knelt beside Buddy, clipping the leash onto his collar. "Ready to go home, partner?" he asked. Buddy responded with a bark, his excitement unmistakable. The drive to Jake's apartment was filled with quiet reflection. As Buddy sat in the passenger seat, his head out the window, Jake couldn't help but think about everything they had been through. The missions, the dangers, the sacrifices. It all led to this moment. "We're starting over," Jake said aloud, glancing at Buddy. "And this time, I'm not letting you down." When they arrived, Jake led Buddy inside, showing him around the small but cozy space. A soft bed with a thick blanket waited in the corner, along with a basket of toys and treats. Buddy sniffed around, his tail wagging as he explored his new home. Jake watched him with a smile. "This is your place now," he said. "You'll never have to fight for warmth or safety again." Over the next few weeks, Buddy settled into his new life with ease. Morning walks through the bustling streets of Brooklyn became their routine, with Buddy drawing attention from passers-by who admired his regal stance and kind eyes. Children would stop to pet him, and Buddy, ever gentle, would sit patiently as they showered him with affection. Jake often joked, "You're more popular than me, pal." But the real change came one afternoon when Jake took Buddy to the park for a K-9 training session. Jake had arranged to meet a local officer who worked with a police K-9 unit, hoping to see if Buddy still had his instincts. To Jake's delight, Buddy excelled in every exercise. Tracking, commands, even a mock search-and-rescue drill. The officer was impressed. "He hasn't lost a step," he said, clapping Jake on the shoulder. "You've got a special one here." Jake beamed with pride. "I always knew that. He's just proving it to the world again." Buddy's story didn't go unnoticed. Word of his rescue and transformation spread, and soon a local journalist reached out to Jake, asking to feature Buddy in a piece about retired service dogs. The article, titled "A Hero's Second Chance," highlighted Buddy's remarkable journey from a neglected backyard to a life of purpose and love. Photos of Buddy in his new home, and with Jake at the park, brought tears to readers' eyes across Brooklyn and beyond. As the weeks turned into months, Buddy's bond with Jake deepened. Together, they became a familiar sight in the community, a testament to resilience and the power of second chances. Buddy's presence even inspired other retired service dog handlers to reconnect with their own canine partners, ensuring no dog was ever forgotten again. Buddy's story is a powerful reminder of the loyalty and courage that dogs bring into our lives. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from, and share your own stories of second chances and new beginnings.